My name's Louis. I'm a mortgage broker at Trinity, which is owned by Omar and Lawrence, who's got away with not speaking today for some reason. That'll change next time, Lawrence. Today I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the conversion and the finance that goes behind sort of buying a HMO and then converting it into a HMO with some real sort of life case studies with some clients that I've helped over the sort of years. I have to be a little bit careful with the case study because they are real clients that aren't here today, so I can't give you all the details of them, but just some examples of the sort of things that people are doing and the success behind them. So a little bit about Trinity, first of all. Trinity actually celebrated their 10-year anniversary in June, so happy birthday to Trinity. Things only really started kicking off with Trinity about 9 years ago when I joined, so that's thanks to me for that. That needs updating because there's a lot more people at Trinity now. I think there's about 30 brokers. We've got admin staff, accounts team, Mus and Ed that are a part of IT and bits and pieces. So big team, not quite as big as Schwenn's just yet. So we need to get on a bit of a recruitment drive. There's our Google Trustpilot reviews and whatnot down there. And at the top right just mentions that we are directly authorised by the FCA. Not many firms are directly authorised by the FCA, and that basically means that we can give advice from every lender that offers mortgages through the intermediary channels. A lot of brokerages are what they are considered appointed representatives, which basically means that they can give you mortgages, but from a restricted panel, which isn't what you guys want. You want to be able to go to whoever's got the best deal for you.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to introduce a sponsor of the channel. Trinity Finance is a directly authorised FCA regulated mortgage brokerage. Founded in 2015 with over 30 mortgage brokers, we're really well placed to help you with all your property finance needs. Starting with first-time buyers and those moving home, we also help people remortgaging residential and buy-to-let property. Alongside that, we specialise in ground-up development, commercial lending, HMO funding, mezzanine, auction, and also your traditional buy-to-let. If that's of interest, get in contact with us via email at info@trinityfinance.co.uk, or you can give us a ring on 01322 907 000, and we look forward to hearing from you.
At the top left, we are also part of the National Association of Finance for Commercial Brokers. Again, not many firms are like that. So just to reiterate, we are a specialist mortgage brokerage for the deals that you guys are either doing or hoping to do. You do not want to be using a mortgage broker from a Countrywide, for example, where we all actually started our careers. But they are not just Countrywide, but there are a lot of brokers that have never done a bridging loan in the past, have never financed a HMO in the past. And a little bit like Ed said, I meet a lot of clients that come to me after they've already spoken to a broker that has led them in the wrong direction, might have paid £1,500 for a valuation that was never going to get them the result that they wanted. So it is important to always speak to a specialist in that area. I'll get rid of my ugly mug. I've been a mortgage broker for, I think it's about 13 years or something. I worked in banking before that, so I've been doing it a long time. It's the only thing I've ever done, only thing I know. So I'll be here all day. If anyone's got any sort of specific cases that they'd like to discuss, just grab me at lunch or afterwards. Be happy to help. I will bore you for a second just on this. This is something that I look at multiple times a day. Doesn't look very interesting. It's not very interesting, but it's really, really important. And I'm referring to what we call the SONIA swap rates. This is how lenders drive their pricing with fixed rates. So over the past couple of years, these have been going absolutely bonkers, mainly up, but more recently down. After the whole Liz Truss debacle, lenders pulled mortgage interest rates because these SONIA swap rates went through the roof. So if you are interested and as sad as what I am, you can sort of look at these. There's a website called Chatham Financial. They update a couple of times a day. If you get a account that you can see how they sort of react live throughout the day. And it is interesting. As I say, lenders react off the back of these. So when you see a spike in interest rates, normally we will then get an email from lenders saying we're about to change our interest rates within a 24-hour period. So it's important for us to stay on top of these. Again, a lot of mortgage brokers won't even know what they are. So it is important. Last week, is that last week? No, this week, sorry, just gone. The Bank of England held the interest rate at the Bank of England base rate of 4.0. Oh, I've gone too far. At 4.25. It was predicted that that would have been a 7-2 vote in terms of sort of holding it at 4.25, which probably was always going to happen. But interesting that one person decided that they were more in favour of a cut. So potentially good news for sort of the upcoming meetings. Right. Omar will sort of kind of hate me for this, but before I get into sort of bridging finance and HMO deals and so on, I won't kind of lie about it. Cash is king, as they say. And if there is a better option for you, rather than going for a bridging loan, I will always tell you that honestly and advise you on the best way to do that. So if you've got money sitting in your bank account, great. That is always the cheapest way to go and fund a deal, do the work to the deal, whatever it might be. But there could always be another opportunity in terms of releasing cash from other sources. So part of my process is whenever I kind of speak to anyone, it's about looking at your overall picture. So how much equity have you got in your residential home? Do you have other buy-to-lets where we can release some equity? Is there a possibility for a further advance on any of those mortgages? Could we get you a second charge? Have you got family that are willing to help where there's equity in their homes? All of those things need to be analysed before we go into the next step, which is either going down the private investor route or whether or not you're going to go and get a bridging loan. For some people in the room, experienced people who've got contacts with private investment, that's great for them, but not many people have that. I think Omar's actually doing a deal today for anyone that's here. He's going to be lending his money at 5% for 24 months. I was going to ask no valuation, no solicitor fees. So speak to him about that at lunch. But for most of us, bridging finance is the route that you'd need to go down in terms of funding your deal and also the development finance behind the deal. So just to talk a little bit about sort of the bridging finance, which is usually used and most commonly used to acquire your deals, and some reasons why you might use bridging finance. Number one is kind of the auction space. We do a hell of a lot of business for people buying at auctions. There are a lot of deals to be had at auction. There are also a lot of things to avoid at auction, which I think Omar's going to speak about a little bit later on. Auctions, you have a very limited time to complete on your deals, and that is exactly what bridging finance is there for. I've got a little bit of a clock there. This isn't as slick as some of the other presentations, doesn't look as great, but that clock there is just to sort of reiterate the fact that most of my clients and the successful ones build their relationships with estate agents, deal sourcers, whoever it is that might be able to find your property. And in order to get those deals, you have to be able to perform. People want you to be able to complete quickly, complete with no dramas, and make sure that you fulfill on the deal that you've promised to go for. If you don't perform, you'll lose that relationship with that estate agent, with whoever that might be, and they'll stop giving you those opportunities for those under market value properties. So when time is of the essence and there isn't cash around to complete with cash, bridging finance is then the best route. You can complete on a bridging loan in as quick as a matter of days if we need to. So it's a tool to have in your armoury to make sure that you get those deals that come come to you. Another reason why you might need bridging finance is if a property's unmortgageable. You'll see there's a picture of a house there with a big crack. You can't get traditional finance on that. Something like that will need to be rectified before you're able to convert it onto term finance. It's another example of why you might need bridging. The bottom example, this is actually one of Omar's deals, is when you're buying a property and your sole intention is to refurbish and convert it into a large HMO, for example. You do not want to be going and getting a standard buy, even if you could get a normal buy-to-let mortgage on that property. You don't want to do that because you want to ultimately refinance that on its increased valuation and pull all your money out. If you go and buy that property on a normal buy-to-let mortgage, which granted it will be cheaper on day one, you're then losing the opportunity to go and get a commercial valuation at the end of it, pull your money out and recycle your cash and go again. As I say, that is one of Omar's deals, so we'll be talking about that a little bit later. There's been a few people Mitch touched on it as well, about sort of development finance. It's called a number of things, to be honest. HMO, refurbishment finance, development finance. Different people call it different. It's all effectively a bridging loan at the end of the day. Lenders just basically separate it into a couple of different things. So obviously cash is difficult to come by. If you've got a property that you've identified where there is an opportunity to convert it into a HMO and you've got the money to be able to buy it on day one, you've got a 25% deposit, which is fantastic, but you haven't got the money to do the refurb, there is this product out there, which a number of lenders are doing at the moment. And typically you will need between 70 to 75% of that day one purchase price. And then lenders will lend you up to 100% of your refurbishment costs. Now, people use this in a number of ways. Okay, you might have enough money to convert a property into a 5-bedroom property, but you might need a bit of a top up to make it that all singing, all dancing, 8-bedroom, 8-suite HMO, which ultimately in the long run, it's going to earn you more money, it's going to be worth more money, it's just better for you overall. This is something that you could utilise. So you don't need all of the refurbishment costs, but you might need a top up on what you've got. Okay. In terms of it does come with additional costs. Okay, so typically, and I will show you that in a second, typically there are 2% arrangement fees. You do have to pay for the bridging loans legal fees. There will be a valuation fee, and depending on the size of the project, there will also be a monitoring surveyor that comes out and inspects your project and how you're basically getting on with it at certain points. That isn't a bad thing, in my opinion. Some builders will hate it, don't get me wrong, but it just ensures that your project is moving at the pace that it should be. There is a cost to that. Most lenders will charge somewhere between about £700 to £1,000 per visit. So again, it is important to think about the overall costs up front, so you know kind of how much needs to be associated to finance costs. But these products are out there and some people don't know about them at all. Okay, some people think, oh, I'm going to need to do that for the whole project, but as I say, you can use it to supplement the cash that you've got to basically improve the deal that you've got in front of you. You will need for this type of product, you will need some cash up front. So what lenders do, they'll give you money in arrears. So if you've got an agreement where after the first 25 grand you've reached a certain point, a monitoring surveyor will come out, check what's been done, and then release that cash to you so you can then go into stage 2. Okay, and then that will continue until the end of the project. Again, interesting what Shwem was saying there, but if your project requires planning, the refurbishment loan attached to your initial bridging loan won't be granted until planning has been approved. So effectively, if you are taking out a refurbishment loan that requires planning, your loan will be separated into 2 parts. They'll give you your bridging loan to firstly help you acquire the deal, and then they will release the refurb loan when planning's been approved. You obviously want to minimise the amount of time that you're spending on the bridge while you haven't got planning. So little tips that kind of Wen said about the pre-app, putting things in when you exchange, if you can delay completion, are all going to minimise the interest that you're spending on that initial bridging loan. So I think.
Can you give me an idea of rates and fees, please?
Yes, I've got that on the next screen. So I'll flick to that. So this is, these were terms that I actually obtained for someone literally a few days ago. So these are accurate, up-to-date interest rates that we'll be looking at. This deal hasn't gone anywhere at the moment, but this is, as I say, just an example of what lenders are quoting currently. Okay, so the property that one of my clients is potentially looking at is worth £350,000. He wants a refurbishment facility of 150k. He's got some money to top that up because I think the build is going to be a little bit more than that, and he thinks it's going to be worth around about 750k at the end of it. So this is based on a 12-month bridge. Okay. So effectively the margin is 0.42 above base, and the total rate that you'll be looking at is 9.29%. As a general rule of thumb, you'll see there that says about term at the end of the loan to value will be 60% at the end of the term. As a general rule of thumb, your overall loan, including interest, can't be any more than 65% of the overall value at the end. Okay, so that's just something to bear in mind. What you'll see is that total facility of around about 450k, it's going to cost them in interest about 40k by the time you've factored in the admin fee, all the interest, and that is if you were to utilise it for the entire 12 months. So, as I say, it is expensive. If there are better ways of doing things, if we can go and get you a further advance on your residential mortgage at 4.5%, of course we're going to be saving money. But these options are there, and in terms of how bridging is priced versus how buy-to-lets are priced, since interest rates have risen, the difference isn't as great as what it used to be. So they do make a lot more sense. And as I say, these facilities are there in order for you to improve your end product rather than being able to afford, make it a 5-bed HMO. You might be able to turn it into a 7-8-bed HMO. So they are there. They are, as I say, a little bit more expensive than sort of the term loans and whatnot, but they're there for a reason. And if there's enough meat in the deal, then it might work for some people. A lot of people are very, very successful with this strategy. And on top of that, it's really just making sure that you've got your exit lined up. So how are you going to repay that bridging loan, that refurbishment loan? Lenders will ask you that up front. So typically it's either via an exit or via a refinance, and we have to be able to evidence that to the lender. So someone like myself will have you an agreement in principle. If it's a refinance that you're looking to do, we'll provide that to the lender, and that will be how we'll exit the deal. Once you have obviously done your, sorted out your deal, refurbish your deal, we'll then be looking at how we're going to get off of it. So in terms of the term loan, and this does also kind of enter into the bridging loan as well, but more importantly on the term loan, when it comes to exiting off of your refinance, or if you've got an existing HMO that you're looking to refinance, existing HMO that you want to purchase, it's so important that you choose the correct lender. As I said, I'm regularly introduced to people that have not gone to the correct lender because they've gone to a broker that doesn't particularly know what they're doing in this area, and as I say, you're having to pay for a couple of valuations. So it's so important you choose the right lender on day one. Firstly, to minimise any delays. If you're trying to get off of a bridging loan, the last thing you want is one application going wrong with one lender, then you've got to replace it with another lender and you're starting from scratch. That could waste 8 weeks and thousands in interest. So there's a few things that come into our job when it comes to choosing that correct lender. So firstly, the applicant profile, okay? Have you got 10 CCJs from a load of parking tickets that you haven't paid? Absolute nightmare, don't do that. If your credit rating's good, then perfect, you know, we won't have any issues on that. What's the ownership structure? Are you buying under a limited company SPV, personal name? Is there any element of trusts or whatnot? So that's really important. There are some vanilla lenders that don't do the quirky stuff, so we need to know that up front. Exposure limits. If you've got a massive portfolio, there are some lenders that will cap you at certain loan sizes, so we need to know about that. Whenever I'm introduced to someone, I'll always ask you for a property schedule. So an Excel spreadsheet that's got all of your properties on it, who the lenders are, what the values are, what the rentals are, and that will enable me to ascertain which lenders I can go to, which lenders I can't. So if you haven't got one of those and you've got a portfolio, I'd strongly recommend getting that spreadsheet for whichever broker you're using. It will save them time and also enable them to give you the best possible advice. The other thing that's absolutely massive, especially when you're coming to refurbs, developments and so on, is your experience. If you have absolutely no experience, you've never owned a buy-to-let before, and you're trying to go in and develop a 7-bed sui generis HMO, that's going to be a struggle from the off. Okay, we're not able to evidence to the lender that you've done anything, you've not flipped a buy-to-let, you've not converted a house into 2 flats, whatever it might be. So that will be tough. Don't get me wrong, there are lenders, okay, but it's more specialist and the interest rate will be a little bit higher. When it comes to trying to get the refurbishment loan, we need to put a bit of a story behind that. So we need to be able to show them that you're going to be able to pull off what you're trying to propose. Having little bits and pieces like contractors that you use that have had that sort of experience in the past, all of that will play in your favour. So something that we'll discuss up front and kind of go from there. Obviously, there's been tons spoken about this already, but the type of valuation that you want from your product. Some lenders will only do bricks and mortar, okay? And a lot of people don't know that, and they're quite shocked and disappointed at the end. Other lenders, depending on the property, will look at a yield / sort of investment valuation, as we call it. So we need to know what we're working with here. Where is the property? What have you done to the property? And how likely are we to get an investment valuation, or is it going to be valued on a bricks and mortar basis? Next thing that's really, really important again is the tenant profile. Are you going to be letting this to professionals? Are you going to be letting it on a corporate let? Maybe the NHS are going to put some staff in there and so on. Or are you going to be going down sort of more the vulnerable tenants, the assisted living, those sorts of things? Again, some lenders will do some aspects of that, some will do all of it, some will do none of it. So we need to know what your plan is in terms of letting it out. And also, then the last point, and also this is last for a reason. Obviously, everyone wants the best possible interest rate, but sometimes that isn't possible. If your credit rating isn't fantastic, you're not going to be able to go and get the best interest rate, and it's going to have higher fees attached to it. If there's any sort of complexity involved at all, some of the vanilla lenders won't touch it. So although interest rate is really, really important, what are we trying to gain from the deal? What are we trying to pull out from the deal will ultimately depend on which lender we can go to. And I've mentioned lender flexibility there. That mainly comes down to what do you think your plan, it's quite a difficult question, but what your plan's going to be for the entire time that you own that property. And although there'll be periods where we can move lender, so at the end of a 5-year fix, for example, if you have got the intention of letting it to professionals for a year or two, and then you're going to be moving on to more of a corporate let and kind of renting it to on that basis, ideally I'd need to know that, because if you want to go back to lender in a couple of years' time and say, I'm going to stop letting it to these guys, I want to let it on a corporate let, it's important to know whether or not the lender is actually going to entertain that. Some of them will turn around and say, no, I'm really sorry, we don't do that. You can break our terms, give us a massive early repayment charge and move lender, or you'll have to scrap your plans and won't be able to let it to those tenants, and then you'll have to wait until potentially the end of the 5-year fix. So important to look at that whole picture. Again, I appreciate that's a bit of a difficult question because things do change, and you will have the opportunity to move lender whenever you refinance. But if that is something that you're thinking about imminently, just mention it to whoever you're working with. Just a bit about the valuations, because that is obviously everyone wants an investment valuation ultimately when talking about HMOs. As I say, not always possible depending on what you've done to the property. So as I say, there are two valuation methods. The first and basic one is a bricks and mortar valuation. Put fair, that is sometimes isn't always fair. Depends on the surveyor you get. Sometimes they can get out on the wrong side of bed and completely stitch you up, and we might have to start from scratch and go and get a different survey. So they look at local comparables, normally within a quarter, potentially a half a mile radius, and that's kind of what you're given. So very, very basic. The next one is obviously what we're all striving for when it comes to your larger HMOs and your investment valuation, where you'll be able to pull out as much money from the deal as possible. I thought it was really good what Mitch said earlier about your whole portfolio not being on an investment valuation and not completely highly geared on that basis, because see that could potentially go wrong in the future. But ultimately, if you want to pull out as much money as possible and go again, this is really kind of what you're after. So investment valuations are generally given for your larger HMOs, where the use class has changed, planning permission has been approved, some C4 and sui generis. Article 4 areas, that is obviously where tons of chat today about planning, but that is where you're going to mainly get the investment valuations, and number of ensuite. So what lenders look at and surveyors look at is how easily can a property be converted back to a family home. So if you've got a 6-bedroom HMO with 2 bathrooms and you only need to rip out 1 bathroom for that to become a family home again, it's unlikely you'll get an investment valuation. But again, different lenders have got different rules around this. So it's really, really important that, as I say, we choose the right lender on day one. There are some specialist lenders which will charge you a little bit of a higher interest rate than some of the cheaper ones, but you'll be guaranteed an investment valuation. And if that's the priority, then that's the way that we have to go. I'll put at the bottom there, be prepared, show you know what you're talking about. Valuers love someone that's prepared. They love a valuation pack. They love to know that you've done your due diligence and the figures that you're providing and that we're trying to get away with, you've thought about and you think are realistic. If you've got comparables, all of your due diligence, just show them on the day. If you've got tenants that have been lined up, they've come around, viewed, you've got a waiting list of tenants that are hopefully going to be renting your property, let them know. All of these things are really, really beneficial when it comes to a survey. I think Omar will agree. He has valuation packs for all of his properties. Every valuation that happens, he is completely prepared, knowing Omar to be very, very, very detailed, and the surveyor won't be able to argue it. So that's how you want to be. You want to give them as much information as possible. Right. Okay. Moving on to a few case studies, just to show really kind of the sorts of examples of things that people are doing. Some of these are really, really simple and kind of what you can do. Some of them are kind of more complex and larger scale. So this is a pretty simple one. Client of mine that loves to invest in semi-commercial properties. This property, so he's actually a pharmacist himself, and that's kind of what he knows and what he likes to invest in. So we've got a shop on the ground floor that was rented, and then there was a vacant 3-bed flat above. I helped him get a bridging loan to acquire the property. He did submit a planning application really, really early in the process, so it didn't take too long. In fact, he did it really well, in fairness to him. So he got a bridging loan to acquire the property. He didn't need any development finance. His dad was helping him out with that. Fantastic. Planning was then granted for HMO on the uppers, and we then refinanced it onto a semi-commercial deal with a specialist lender. He pulled practically all of his money out of that deal, barring a few grand. He has since gone on to buy another 3 over the last 2 years. So he's scaled really, really well. It does help that his dad's been in the game in the past, so he's done a lot of the work on the properties and so on. But he's done really, really well for himself. So that's just, pretty simple. That property, he was offered that through a local estate agent purely because he started popping his head in, letting them know what he was interested in, and effectively just making a good impression. And that was he got a phone call about that, and we acted really quickly, and I think he completed in about 13 days. So he offered under market value. The vendor was happy with it. And as I say, he performed, and since then he's had a few phone calls for similar properties, and he's been one of the first phone calls from the estate agents. Next one, this is a little bit different. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because this is becoming more and more popular in terms of how people are buying properties. Since all the tax changes, obviously people are buying properties under limited companies, and it's becoming more and more common where people are selling their limited companies and all of the properties within it. It's a really, really good way of buying a portfolio. The stamp duty savings are massive. He wanted to buy it because he was concerned about what was going to happen to his shop. He didn't know the new owner might have had different plans to kind of get rid of everyone and kind of convert it into flats or whatever he was going to do. So he was really, really motivated to try and buy this, keep his business that had been going for a good 15 to 20 years going, and then he could do whatever else he wanted to the rest of it. So we bought, so it's considered a share purchase. More and more lenders are coming into this space. It ended up saving him 80 grand, just under 80 grand in stamp duty. So it's a massive, massive incentive to do it this way. What he is currently doing, he's that gym at the top, he's converting that into residential. He's also adding a floor above, and there's a massive, massive car park at the back where there's further development opportunity. So overall, a fantastic deal for him. And as I say, it means that his business, which is really, really profitable, remains completely untouched. So that the uppers, I think he's going to, can't remember exactly how many flats he's going to get on that, but that's all going through planning at the moment, and he'll be using development finance to do all of the work on that. So just as I say, going back to that, if you are, if a deal kind of touches your desk and it is to buy someone's limited company that has a portfolio of HMOs or however that might be, there are lenders that will entertain that. So just bear it in mind. Right, this next one, this was a really interesting one. This was a vacant mixed-use building in West London. The client, these were 2 architect clients of mine, and they did something crazy with the building in the end. But so they bought this property with a bridging loan. They used 100% development finance for the works. It was basically above the mini cab station from memory. So planning was granted to add an additional floor to this building, and in the uppers they had planning for 5 flats. Once the 5 flats had gone through planning, they then got further consent under PD to split 3 of those flats into smaller units, which then created a total of 8 spaces. All of these spaces were self-contained, and although 4 of them were under 20 square meters, they all had shower and kitchenette facilities. What was really, really interesting about this property is that the ground floor and the basement retained commercial use, and what they did, they made a shared workspace. So this was just before, this actually happened while COVID was going on. So the ground floor of the property, they basically put desks in everywhere so that all of the tenants could work from the building. And then they also had a massive shared kitchen where they sort of run like entertainment spaces as well. So they get chefs in every now and again, and it's just sort of an additional service that they offer to their clients. They rent this property out on very, very different to kind of how a lot of HMOs are run. So people can rent these spaces for as short as a month period, but these guys' waiting list for this property and all the rest of their properties is absolutely crazy. So they've never had any voids. This property, when I did this application for them a few years ago, the rental was around about 160k per annum. I think that's increased now. So again, they do really, really well for that. And the beauty of this deal was, again, these guys came to me after being knocked back by another broker who said that it wasn't possible. The beauty of this deal is, although the ground floor and the basement, the use class was still commercial, there was no income generated from the commercial aspect. So every broker that they'd spoken to was pricing them on a commercial basis. I managed to get that for them under buy-to-let pricing. So it was about 1.5% cheaper than everything else. And that was purely because the rental income from the property was solely derived from the residential element and none from the commercial asset at all. This is one of Omar's, and the one that was on kind of the slide about about bridging finance. So this is next to our office. So Omar bought this place for 345k, and he turned it into an 8-bed, 8 ensuite, 7 ensuite HMO. It got revalued at 850k. That was a few years ago now, so that's probably 900k now, say. And this brings in, is it 90k now? Yeah, it brings in 90k per annum. What was the build cost on that?
250 grand. It was a while back, and it's also in an Article 4 area, and we went in directly for C3 to sui generis planning, and it got approved. We didn't think it was going to be approved, but there's quite a few features about this property. One, a lot of the houses close by are still owned by the council, so there wasn't a huge amount of objection from the local neighbours. Two, it's got this huge parking space, so we were able to demonstrate a lot of parking at the front and a garden as well. And all the rooms are of good size, so the amenity conversation wasn't that difficult. But it's really difficult because this is Bexley Borough, and this sailed through. And then I've had other applications in Bexley for sui generis that have been refused, and they've absolutely slated the applications. There's sort of no rhyme or reason with the same council as to whether we'll get these things approved. But I think from Louis' perspective, when we financed this, we were guaranteed, it was in an Article 4 area, it's sui generis, it's a large HMO, we were guaranteed an investment valuation, so we knew that once we got the planning, which he just wanted to demonstrate.
Yeah.
That's how
Yes, lovely, lovely place. I think Lawrence uses some of the parking there, didn't you? And again, this was actually another one of Omar's. So this is a prime example of sort of why a bridging loan is so useful. I think there was a bit of skullduggery here, wasn't there, with the key access, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
So this was a property bought in 2019. There was a large crack, which meant that it wasn't mortgageable. Purchased for 265k. These are the bits and pieces that were done with it, and it revalued at 600k. This was since Bromley was now converted into an Article 4 area. So 700 plus that will now value for. And what does that rent for now?
65,000, just on 70.
Yeah. So you just another example of kind of, you know, bridging loan, refurbishment, and obviously what it could be worth at the end. This was very, very glad this went well because they're both here in the room today. Would have been awkward otherwise. They're massive Spurs fans as well. So yeah, very, very grateful that all went to plan. This is a 7-bed, 7 ensuite HMO in Enfield, which was mentioned, been mentioned quite a lot today. This particular application, so when I met Mark and Ryan, what we spoke about was the different types of valuations and obviously what was important. So because obviously this has gone through sui generis and whatnot, hoping to go to a cheaper lender that would offer a hybrid valuation, but with a hybrid valuation where surveyors look at both investment and bricks and mortar, sometimes you can't really guarantee that you're going to get the best possible valuation. So what I advised the guys to do was to run 2 applications simultaneously. So one was with a cheap lender where we'd hope that the hybrid valuation would come out as positively as possible. That valuation was free, okay, so no financial risk at all. The other one was with a specialist provider where we're guaranteeing that they're going to do an investment valuation. The valuation on that would have cost the guys about £1,500. So the way we did it, I submitted both at the same time, parked the specialist lender's application temporarily, just dragged the feet with sending in different bits and pieces, and we waited until the first cheaper option, we waited until that valuation had gone ahead to see whether or not we were going to press the button and pay the £1,500 with the specialist provider. Thankfully, there was no need. A hybrid valuation just a couple of months ago came in at 950 grand. The surveyor estimated it would bring in about 6.6 per month. Guys, have you rented? Is that all? Is it rented now? What?
Yeah, we've just agreed on 96,000.
96. Yeah. Amazing. So yeah, really great. Yeah, great result. Yeah. So yeah, they were a little bit harsh on the rental side of things, but overall, we're really happy with that. We thought it was going to come somewhere around about the 850 mark. So pleasantly surprised with how the valuer kind of turned out with that one. But they're little things that kind of we as brokers can do. And although it's more time consuming for us, you know, at the end of that, I submitted 2 applications. You know, obviously one is only going to go ahead. So doubling up the workload, but that's kind of what we have to do when, you know, with these sort of creative things, it has to be done. And ultimately delaying that second valuation saved the guys £1,500. And thankfully, the cheaper interest rate, the valuation came back well. And then a week before completion, the lender reduced their interest rate by 0.3%. So we got a little revised offer, just as a bit of a little bonus there. So yeah, really pleased that worked out. And I know the guys were super on top of kind of all the preparation for the valuation. And the surveyor was so impressed. They valued it at more than what I even put on the application, which never happened. So whatever they did for their valuation, tap them up at lunch and do the exact same thing. And the final thing, this is nothing to do with HMOs at all, but there's been a lot of talk about commercial to resi conversions. This is obviously on a large scale. This is a client that I helped towards the back end of last year, completed very recently. They bought a derelict old shoe factory where they got planning for 89 new build flats. There's actually a third phase where there's another 35 flats which are nearing completion as well. But again, this was used, although you think about the scale and the amount of interest that's been paid, but if the numbers stack up, people like this are still using bridging loans, development finance in order to get these deals through. So this was a 2-year build. The GDV at the end of this was about £16 million. What they ended up doing was selling half, so they split the freehold into two. They then kept they kept the freehold under a limited company, granted individual leases for 49 of the flats and sold them on the open market. With the other half, they've refinanced them. I've taken them to one lender under what's called a multi-unit freehold mortgage. It's a lot easier in terms of solicitors. You have one mortgage on the whole building. That's enabled them to pay off their development finance. The sale from the other properties has enabled them to be able to go on and do their next project and bring in a lot of profit. So just another example of how to utilise bridging and development finance.
Excellent. I think that's pretty much it. If anyone wants Louis' details, he's around. There's a QR code on some of the desks. You can scan it and send him an email and stuff like that.